Friends, family, countrymen, lend me your ears. This is Tim with another episode of America the Battlefield. This being part 3 of my podcast series on the real JFK Files Beyond Redacted. If you didn't see part 1, we followed the money trail of who stood to gain, who benefited from Kennedy's death, Johnson's involvement with the mob, Carlos Marcello, Malcolm Wallace, Richard Nixon, and Jack Ruby Rubenstein, their mob hit of Lee Harvey Oswald, Kennedy attempting to take the money power away from the Federal Reserve via Executive Order 11110, which returned to the United States Treasury the power to issue currency. We reviewed Kennedy's jaw-dropping 1961 speech to the National Press Club, in which he launched a major effort to root out and expose these secret societies and their shadow government, which was working in secret to seize power. What Kennedy referred to as the monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. In parts 1 and 2, we highlighted the Israeli intelligence and the Mossad's involvement in the cover-up of Kennedy's assassination. The secret intelligence pipeline between the CIA and Israel, redacted memos calling for JFK to break up the CIA in 1961 for focusing not on their primary mission of intelligence gathering, but instead on regime change around the world. We also covered Israeli intelligence, the Mossad, and Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell's child trafficking network, which is all coming out. We also revealed how JFK's sacrifice was inexorably connected with the number 13, with Friday the 13th, and linked with the retribution of the Templar Order against the Roman Catholic Church. We went over the history of the Templars being betrayed and criminalized by King Philip IV of France, with his lackey Pope Clement V, the Roman Church, and Dealey Plaza being an outdoor Masonic temple of the sun located exactly on the 33rd parallel, or the prime meridian. The plaza itself was named after the first Masonic Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Dallas, Texas, George Bannerman Dealey. And this sun temple sits exactly in the 33rd parallel, or prime meridian, which we addressed. JFK was the first Catholic president, and his sacrifice was an ancient ritualistic vendetta by the Masons, the progeny of the Templar Knights, and William Greer, the 33rd degree Freemason, and Kennedy's limo driver inflicting the fatal shot that killed John F. Kennedy. We revealed how the date, the time, and the location of the sacrifice were significant to the Templar Masons. We will go into that more in detail later. In part 2 of this podcast, we left off the Balfour Declaration. But before that, you can find us at YouTube. We're also at Rumble, where I upload all the videos, and my blog, where I put all the content and the text and the links supporting all the work that I do in each video. You can also find us on our Patreon, and I hope that you support our work, because this is it takes a lot of work and time, and I hope that you benefit and get something out of it. Without further ado, let's pick up where we left off. What was the Balfour Declaration? It was a public statement issued by the British government in 1917 during the First World War, announcing its support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, then an Ottoman region with a small minority Jewish population. The declaration was contained in a letter dated November 2nd and published on November 9th, 1917, from the United Kingdom's Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Lord Rothschild, a leader of the British Jewish community, for transmission to the Zionist Federation of Great Britain. The text of the declaration was published in the press on November 9th, 1917. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. But keep in mind, this is done by the British government and aristocracy. It was not done in Israel, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. That would have been the World Zionist Federation. This is the Basel program approved at the 1897 First Zionist Congress. The first line states, Zionism seeks to establish a home for the Jewish people in Palestine secured under public law. Don't worry, we're getting somewhere with this. Correspondence with the Palestinian Arab delegation in the Zionist organization. The left-hand page is from November 1918. The right-hand page is from the Winston Churchill White Paper of June of 1922. If you need to pause this and zoom in, you can. Please do. This is the military situation map of November 1st, 1917, immediately prior to the release of the Balfour Declaration. If you'll notice, there is no Israel yet. No Gaza Strip, just the Middle East. And it shows the military movements at that time on November 1st, 1917. This is a copy of Lord Rothschild's initial draft declaration, together with its covering letter, July 18th, 1917, from the British War Cabinet Archives. Zoom in a little bit. As a part of the War Cabinet discussions, views were sought from 10 representative Jewish leaders. Those in favor comprise 4 members of the Zionist negotiating team. You'll notice Lord Rothschild's name there. He had a big part to play in this, and he financed it. This is a document from the British War Cabinet minutes approving and the release of the declaration on October 31st, 1917. Again, if you need to pause and zoom in, please do. This is Lord Curzon's October 26, 1917 cabinet memorandum, circulated 1 week prior to the declaration, addressing the meaning of the phrase, a national home for the Jewish race in Palestine. That one's hard to read, but it's important. This one is from Edwin Montague, the only Jew in a senior British government position at that time. He wrote on August 23rd, 1917, in a memorandum condemning Zionism as a, quote, mischievous political creed, unquote, and stating his belief that, quote, the policy of His Majesty's government is anti-Semitic in result and will prove a rallying ground for anti-Semites in every country of the world, unquote. Side note, I routinely get called an anti-Semite by people who are unfamiliar with this work, who don't like me exposing these truths. Even me reading this in their mind makes me an anti-Semite, because obviously I must hate Jewish people if I read these writings and share them with my audience. It's a very delusional, hypocritical, and disingenuous mindset. And I honestly don't care when they call me names like that, because I understand where ad hominem character attacks come from. It's one of those logical fallacies when they lack credibility and they have no argument. Instead of dealing with the content of the message, they attack the character of the messenger, so that then they can try to discredit the character of the messenger, so that its content has no merit. But it has no effect on me, so we push on. The Balfour Declaration, as published in the New York Times, November 9th, 1917. I think it has the whole copy. Maybe it's a little redacted. It's just in a different font, it looks like. Yeah. This is interesting. A Falestin newspaper edition in 1932 featuring a caricature lamenting Balfour Declaration's impacts on Palestine, showing Jewish immigration and the dispossession of Arab peasants. We'll zoom in here a little bit. Why does this matter? Why is it important in the context of the JFK files? Because the political state of Israel was founded 8 months after the OSS via the Balfour Declaration, which was planned and created entirely by international Zionist bankers in the British government in London and in New York City on Wall Street. Before some people go crazy, yes, I understand the differences between Zionists and the average Jewish person. Their goals are not the same, as outlined by Theodor Herzl and other framers of Zionist ideology. An uninformed man in the comments on a group on Facebook regarding part 2 of this podcast series, which was posted there, he actually commented to me today. He said, and I quote, "Watch out for this guy. He's a raging anti-Semite and actually believes in the protocols of the elders of Zion." As some of you know, my video on the protocols of Zion, in which all I did was read from their own words, was censored by YouTube and taken down. I challenged their censorship, their decision, and they put it back up. Thankfully, I didn't think it was going to happen. But he said, "Watch out for this guy. He's a raging anti-Semite, and he actually believes in the protocols of the elders of Zion." All because I merely read from a very old copy of the manuscript, which I have in my possession. And then he made me unable to respond to his comment. Like most people of that mindset who are intolerant and supportive of the censorship and silencing of their opposition. My long-time readers and viewers know that I read pretty much everything. I listen to everyone, and I quote from people I agree with and disagree with. And I never believe any of it unless I can verify it in my own research, which I encourage all of you to do. Please, for the love of God, do that. It's the best advice I ever received. Or if it proves that their words become action based on the protocols, every one of them came to fruition in a lesser or greater degree. But I'm an anti-Semite for observing it, taking it in, and taking it for what it is and sharing it with you. That makes me an anti-Semite, I guess. I don't know, whatever. So anyway, now that we got that out of the way, that brings us to the OSS. Who are they? The Office of Strategic Services was the progenitor of the CIA. The OSS became the Central Intelligence Agency. The OSS was founded entirely by the Knights Templar, 33rd degree Mason President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, an ancestor to the Delano family of the British East India Trading Company. Appointed General William J. Donovan, a highly decorated World War I officer and a Templar Knight, as the director of the OSS. Co-founders Alan Dulles, William Casey, William Colby, and James Jesus Angleton were also all members of the Templar Order. I'd like to start this episode by showing something from here. Let's just bring this up for you. There we are. This podcast is rough, it's raw, it's fast and loose, but it's real. I do it live. There's no editing, no censorship. And that's all for you. I want to show you this from an X post by Mo Cheese, please. Guess he loves pizza. I'm going to read it for you. It's almost as if Trump is releasing the files of JFK, MLK, and Epstein in an orderly fashion to tell a story. a story that shows the progression and influence of a specific group of people. The JFK Files define the exact date this group infiltrated the United States with a coup d'etat by killing a sitting president. The MLK Files will show how they continued to target and manipulate those who had influence and opposed their power. Sounds like the deep state. The Epstein Files will then show how this group's power and influence grew until it oozed through every orifice of society, from politicians, bankers, to the movie, music industries. And this guy forgot Weinstein and Diddy. The story will end with this group finally exposing themselves with retaliation tactics to prevent this information from coming out. Their cover up will include trying to destroy damning evidence that could be used against them, eliminate those who try to expose them just like they did JFK and MLK, pretend the information isn't real and isn't verified. That's where the Operation Mockingbird media will come in. Their agents in place who are trained by the CIA. We found that out back in the Church Committee of the 1960s. They will claim that those who are exposing them are racists and fabricating everything. Finally, when they're backed into a corner and have no other options, they'll push the nuclear button and try to crash whatever mechanisms they still have control over: television, internet, monetary systems, etc. The more they cover things up, the more they expose themselves. And the more citizens will realize who was actually behind the scenes controlling and manipulating not only the United States, but almost every nation on earth. Having said that, in the next episode of this podcast, in part 4, we will show how Q was formed as a long-term covert military counterinsurgency operation immediately following the assassination of President Kennedy. Who is involved in that and why? And how Donald Trump was recruited 60 years later to be the public face of it. Please stay tuned for that. In this episode, I would like to do a short recap of William Greer. We touched upon him in an earlier episode. He was the driver of John F. Kennedy's limousine on November 22nd, 1963 in Dealey Plaza. Let's see here. I have some photos here of William Greer. Let's go through these a little bit. I have a picture in here of the bloody limo, the 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 day of Kennedy's assassination. So this is him. He looks a lot to me like Werner von Braun, the father of the Goddard Space Flight Center, who was brought over under Operation Paperclip, the Nazi rocket scientist. He looks a lot like him to me. Here's William Greer driving Robert F. Kennedy Jr., JFK, and that looks like Caroline, their sister. There's William Greer with a fedora on. William Greer, November 22nd, 1963, Dealey Plaza. There's the limousine with the bubble top removed. We're going to go into that a little bit. Here's a grisly photo of the limousine where John F. Kennedy was sitting in the middle next to his wife. Blood and fragments. Sorry, it's a little violent and tragic, but this has to be addressed in the context of this larger story. Here is the bubble top affixed in a previous appearance by John F. Kennedy. We're going to go into why that's important. Here's one of the final interviews of William Greer. Let's see. So Greer continued his Secret Service career until retiring in 1966 and passed away on February 19th, 1985 in St. Petersburg, Florida. Let's go over here. I want to show you something. Here's some more photos from an Instagram post of John F. Kennedy's bubble top, which was bulletproof, affixed to the limousine. I'm going to go through these a little bit, let you see this. Get out of the way. It's pretty high speed, low drag for that period. It was meant to protect him from assassins. There's William Greer driving the limousine with the bubble top affixed. Another appearance. The bubble top was always affixed. Why was it left off on November 22nd, 1963? I have a few notes on this subject. I wrote a blog on this topic, Who Really Had Kennedy Killed? Follow the Money, published on November 13th, 2013. I'm going to read you something. Who was responsible for the removal of JFK's protective bubble top that day? Here's what we know today. Bill Moyers, who is a current liberal media talking head and former ordained minister, was an aide to Vice President Johnson in 1963. The Secret Service reported that Bill Moyers went to them before the Dallas motorcade and told them, quote, "The president wants this damned bubble top removed now, exclamation point, unquote." That's some funny talk for an ordained minister. But Kennedy aides Jerry Bruno and Kenny O'Donnell later testified to the Warren Commission that President John Kennedy gave no such order regarding the removal of the protective bubble top. We know who did not give that order, but whomever did give that order was he or they who had the means, the motive, and the manpower to kill the president. He or they who benefited and stood to gain from the outcome. Very interesting. Next in this episode, part 3 of the Real JFK Files Beyond Redacted, we're going to show who benefited from Kennedy's death and why. Why did they kill him? Since the why is rarely covered. I'm going to play a short video clip for you. This clip comes at the end of Oliver Stone's 1991 film, JFK. In this clip, New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison, acted by Kevin Costner, who was investigating the assassination of John F. Kennedy, asked CIA agent X a question while sitting on a park bench on the National Mall. And Oliver Stone answered the question in symbolism. Interestingly, Agent X, Elon Musk changed the name from Twitter to X. What is X? X is in mathematics is a placeholder for something else. I don't know why I thought of that just now, but my mind goes in circles. X is a placeholder in mathematics. Agent X says to Jim Garrison asks the question, "I never realized Kennedy was so dangerous to the establishment. Is that why?" And then I want to show you Agent X's answer. And Oliver Stone is going to answer truthfully who actually killed the president. Bear with me on this. It's really important. Here we go.
Anyway, after I came back, I asked myself, why was I, the chief of special ops, selected to travel to the South Pole at that time to do a job that any number of others could have done? And I wondered if it could have been because one of my routine duties, if I had been in Washington, would have been to arrange for additional security in Texas. So I decided to check it out. And sure enough, I found out that someone had told the 112th Military Intelligence Group at 4th Army Headquarters at Fort Sam Houston to stand down that day over the protests of the unit commander, Colonel Wright.
I believe it's a mistake.
This is significant because it is standard operating procedure, especially in a known hostile city like Dallas, to supplement the Secret Service. I mean, even if we had not allowed the bubble top to be removed from the limousine, we would have placed at least 100 to 200 agents on the sidewalk without question. I mean, only a month before Dallas, UN Ambassador Adlai Stevenson was spit on and hit. There had already been several attempts on de Gaulle's life in France. We would have arrived days ahead of time, studied the route, checked all the buildings, never would have allowed all those wide open empty windows overlooking Dealey, never. We'd have had our own snipers covering the area. The minute a window went up, they'd have been on the radio. We'd have been watching the crowd, packages, rolled up newspapers, coat over and up. Never would have let a man open an umbrella along the way. Never would have allowed that limousine to slow down to 10 miles an hour, much less take that unusual curve at Houston and Elm. You would have felt an army presence in the streets that day. None of this happened. It was a violation of the most basic protection codes we have, and it is the best indication of a massive plot in Dallas. Now, who could have best done this? Black Ops, Mr. Garrison. People in my business, people like my superior officer could have called Colonel Reich and said, look, we have another unit coming from so-and-so providing security. You'll stand down. I mean, that day, in fact, there were some individual Army intelligence people in Dallas. I'm still trying to figure out who and why. But they weren't protecting the client. And, of course, Oswald. Army intel had a Harvey Lee Oswald on file. And all those files have been destroyed. Many strange things were happening, and your Lee Harvey Oswald had nothing to do with them. We had the entire cabinet on a trip to the Far East. We had 1/3 of a combat division returning from Germany in the air above the United States at the time of the shooting. At 12:34 p.m., the entire telephone system went out in Washington for a solid hour. And on the plane back to Washington, word was radioed from the White House Situations Room to Lyndon Johnson that one individual performed the assassination. Does that sound like a bunch of coincidences to you, Mr. Garrison? No. Not for one moment. The cabinet was out of the country to get their perceptions out of the way. Troops were in the air for possible riot control. The telephones didn't work to keep the wrong stories from spreading if anything went wrong with the plan. Nothing was left to chance. He could not be allowed to escape alive. Well, I never thought things were the same after that. Vietnam started for real. There was an air of, I don't know, make-believe in the Pentagon and CIA. Those of us who'd been in secret ops since the beginning knew the Warren Commission was fiction. But there was something deeper, uglier. I knew Alan Dulles very well. I briefed him many a time in his house. But for the life of me, I still can't figure out why he was appointed to investigate Kennedy's death, the man who had fired him. Dulles, by the way, was General Wyeth's benefactor. I got out in '64, resigned my commission.
I never realized Kennedy was so dangerous to the establishment. Is that why?
Well, that's a real question, isn't it? Why? The how and the who is just scenery for the public. Oswald, Ruby, Cuba, the mafia. Keeps them guessing like some kind of parlor game, prevents them from asking the most important question, why? Why was Kennedy killed? Who benefited? Who has the power to cover it up? Who?
Okay, if you'll notice in that clip, at the end of Oliver Stone's JFK film, Jim Garrison asked, I never realized Kennedy was so dangerous to the establishment. Is that why? And this is Agent X and how he answered. Quote, well, that's the real question, isn't it? Why? The how and the who is just scenery for the public. Oswald, Ruby, Cuba, the mafia keeps them guessing like some kind of parlor game. Prevents them from asking the most important question, why? Why was Kennedy killed? Who benefited? Who has the power to cover it up? Who? Who indeed? Director Oliver Stone answered Agent X's question in symbolism. Some of you may know where I'm going with this. Some of you may not. He showed the obelisk, the generative force of Freemasonry, over his shoulder, with the Capitol dome, the womb of ISIS, in the distance. That context was omitted from this copy of this clip in this film, but I'm going to play you a very old copy by William Cooper from his Mystery Babylon series. Check this out. Notice the differences. For some reason in this copy, the audio was redacted. I don't know if it was censored by YouTube for copyright infringement or not. It'll pick up shortly. Notice these differences from the copy I played you. Here we go.
never thought things were the same after that. Vietnam started for real. There was an era of, I don't know, make-believe in the Pentagon and CIA. Those of us who'd been in secret ops since the beginning knew the Warren Commission was fiction. But there was something deeper, uglier. I knew Alan Dulles very well. I briefed him many a time in his house. But for the life of me, I still can't figure out why he was appointed to investigate Kennedy's death, the man who had fired him. Dulles, by the way, was General Wyeth's benefactor. I got out in '64, resigned my commission.
I never realized Kennedy was so dangerous to the establishment. Was that why?
Well, that's a real question, isn't it? Why? The how and the who is just scenery for the public. Oswald, Ruby, Cuba, the mafia. Keeps them guessing like some kind of parlor game, prevents them from asking the most important question, why? Why was Kennedy killed? Who benefited? Who has the power to cover it up? Who?
This is the shot that directly followed Agent X's answer to Jim Garrison. This shot was omitted, showing the obelisk answering Agent X's question. Who killed Kennedy? Here are William Cooper's comments regarding this from his Mystery Babylon series. Please pay close attention.
Who, indeed. Oliver Stone is laughing at you. And if you can't make the connection here, if you don't understand after having watched over 7 hours of instruction as to who's behind it, what it means, and what their symbology is, then I can't help you at this point.
Just so everyone knows, at this point in William Cooper's broadcasts, he was at, I believe, episode 7 in his Mystery Babylon series. And it literally went to about episode 27. So he was pretty early on in that series at this point.
Beyond my help, you're beyond understanding. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like more information on the mystery religion of Babylon, the secret societies that have infiltrated every level of our society, military, and government, and are now destroying this country from within, I did a series on my radio show, The Hour of the Time, which is broadcast on WWCR shortwave radio 7435 megahertz worldwide at 9 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Mountain, 11 p.m. Central, and midnight Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday, every week, every Monday through Friday. Now, I broadcast this series, and at the current time, while this is being edited, the series is ongoing. I have no idea how many tapes will make up this series, for I am literally exposing 6,000 years of history that has been veiled and has remained hidden from the general public for all that time and even today.
A lot of you could hear the frustration in his voice. At the time he made those broadcasts, and William Cooper published his book and did his radio broadcast and did the Mystery Babylon series, very few people were awake. He was shouting from the mountaintops, literally from his home in Arizona. Very few people were listening. And he had amassed a listenership of, I believe, 10 million people by the end by the time he was killed, which was significant at that time. Bill Clinton named him the most dangerous man in America for these truths that he was sharing with the world. And it just wasn't enough people to make a difference. And he was really frustrated and fed up. And at some point, I thought he was going to give up, but he didn't. He powered through. He cared about he cared about the American people, and he wanted to make a difference. And I know a lot of people struggle with this, especially the Masonic Templar angle. I have a lot of people come to me and friends of mine who are into the subject, and they're like, "But Tim, I had an uncle or a grandpa who was a Mason. He was a Christian man, a good person. He would never do the things you're saying." And I'm not casting aspersion on any particular person at all. It's all based in the ideology, and I've read all their books. I know who their God is, who their true God is that they serve at the esoteric levels, at the highest levels of their initiations and their degrees. They don't hide it among themselves. And maybe what Oliver Stone was doing with this film, showing who killed Kennedy, maybe it's the revelation of the method. Truth in movies, lies in the news. We all know who study this stuff, and like the externalization of the hierarchy in the occult. In their beliefs, they are required to tell you in advance before they carry out their goals. So there it is. They always put their signature on their work. They put it in Dealey Plaza, the 14-stepped obelisk with the flame of Lucifer, the light, the intellect, the phallus of Osiris, with the reflecting pool reflecting the pure light of her master, just like in Washington, D.C., the George Washington Monument with the reflecting pool, the masculine, the feminine nature. It's reflected all through nature. They're deists, remember. They worship nature, the sun, the moon, the masculine and feminine energies. And I'd like to recall Kennedy's speech, The President and the Press. Sorry, I'm a little tired right now. I'm going to get through this. I shared this in the first part of this series. In his speech to the President and the Press, the newspaper publishers of his day, John F. Kennedy warned us about these secret societies, the secret proceedings, and the secret oaths, and that secrecy was repugnant in a free and open society. He asked for their help to research and investigate them, to rout them out, because they were corrupting all of our government and educational and scientific military institutions from within. He was asking for their help. And I don't think he got it, because as we know now from the church committee and Operation or Project Mockingbird, that they had CIA agents in place at all the major newspaper and media publishing houses during the 60s. They were probably made the editors in chief. So yeah. Oh, I think I'm going to finish this one here. Let me take you out with this. I'm going to take you out with this. It's another clip from William Cooper's seminal documentary, Kennedy, the Sacrifice King. I hope you get something out of this series. I really hope you take something away from it, and it teaches you something and compels you to dig further, like it did for me, this subject. See you in the next episode. If you like this, please subscribe and share it with your friends. Thank you.
Now notice, from the center of the railroad overpass to this building, behind it they have erected a pyramid building which is directly in line with Elm Street and the center of the railroad overpass. The pyramid is the symbol, or the most recognizable symbol of the mystery religion. And there's the courthouse with the Texas stake flag hanging on the pole, limp as if left impotent by the events that happened on the 22nd of November, 1963. Remember the legend that Set or Typhon chopped Osiris into 14 pieces and scattered him about the land. Isis, grieving, went and retrieved the pieces one by one and found all save one, the phallus or the penis of Osiris, the generative force, the lost word of Freemasonry, the representation of the sun, the light, Lucifer. Remember also that she created his phallus, made a penis of gold, and replaced Osiris on the altar of the mystery school with the golden penis. And that is what you will always find on the altar of the mystery schools in the dismantling of old Christian cathedrals and churches in Europe. They have found concealed within the altar, where the congregation and the priests did not know or could not see, stone phalluses or penises, mocking the Christian religion. And while Christians were kneeling before the altar, they were kneeling before the phallus or the penis of Osiris. These men are the greatest liars and deceivers and manipulators in the history of the world, and while they profess benevolence, they are creators of the greatest malevolence that the world has ever known. Now remember this story, and remember the significance of the penis. For when Jim Garrison arrested Clay Shaw and they searched his home, this is what they found.
There were marble statues of penises on his dresser.
Folks, I want your journey here to be one of self-discovery, so I'm going to show you two examples of how the film has been manipulated. Look above William Greer's left shoulder. He's the driver. You'll see where the emulsion's been scraped off the film all the way up into the grass. You can see where we've drawn a red line to show you this. They're either hiding what really happened, or they scraped the emulsion off to make it look like something happened that maybe did not.
Thank you, friends, for sticking with me in this process. I hope you enjoyed this series. There's a lot more to come, honestly. Looking over my notes, it's probably going to be parts 5 and 6. Maybe 7. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and your attention to this, because it's, in my opinion, one of the most important subjects over the last 60 years that really needs to be solved. Not the who, not the how, but the why. The why is so important. No one's talking about it. Please help me in this discovery. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.